Do you remember that one scene in The Office where Jim pranks Dwight by giving him a mint every time he turns his computer on, but at the end of the episode doesn't give Dwight a mint when he turns his computer on one last time? And then Dwight proceeds to question why his hand is out and why his mouth is starting to taste bad. That's what we call classical conditioning. That was brought to us by Pavlov and his dog experiment. I'm Lily Lambert, and this is a breakdown of that said experiment. Before we get started, there's a few things you're going to need to know. A neutral stimuli is the first term, conditioned stimuli is the second, and conditioned response is the third. A neutral stimuli is not connected to a response. A conditioned stimuli is one that evokes an emotional or psychological response after conditioning. A conditioned response is a learned response to a previously neutral stimuli. Now we can jump straight into the experiments. When Pavlov discovered that any object or event which the dog learned to associate with food, such as the lab assistant, would trigger the same response of salivation, he realized that he had made an important scientific discovery. Accordingly, he devoted the rest of his career to studying this type of learning. In behavioralist terms, food is an unconditioned stimulus, and salivation is an unconditioned response. In his experiment, Pavlov used a metronome as his neutral stimulus. For the video, I'm showing a bell because I don't have a metronome. By itself, the metronome did not elicit a response from the dog. Next, Pavlov began the conditioning procedure, whereby clicking the metronome while introduced just before he gave food to his dog, a number of repeated trials of this procedure he presented the metronome on his own. As you might expect, the sound of the clicking of the metronome on its own now caused an increase in salivation. So the dog had learned an association between the metronome and the food, and a new behavior had been learned. Because this response was learned, or conditioned, it's called a conditioned response, also known as a Pavlovian response. The natural stimulus has become a conditioned stimulus. Pavlov found that for associations to be made, the two stimuli had to be presented close together in time, such as a bell. He called this the law of temporal continuity. If time between the conditioned stimulus and unconditioned stimulus is too great, then learning will not occur.